So I tweeted out a question with a link to the article saying, is she eligible under the citizenship clause to be vice president? And a lawyer close to President Trump, Jenna Ellis, retweeted it, and the president was asked about it. So now the left has gone crazy saying it's false and you can't even ask the question. You're a racist, which is absurd because similar questions were asked about John McCain and Ted Cruz. I mean, I remember talking to reporters back in the day when this Obama birth certificate issue was floating around. And I thought there were more substantial questions about McCain's eligibility than Barack Obama's. Vice President Biden picked Kamala Harris as his vice presidential running mate. Now, Judicial, I'm not telling you to vote for or against any candidate. I don't have any direct interaction with her other than I was at these Kavanaugh hearings, those outrageous hearings, especially the second set where he was viciously smeared and knowingly lied about, defamed and slandered by senators and that witness against him. And I remember Senator Harris and the other Democratic senators, the leftist senators, as Kavanaugh is being emotionally torn apart, he and his family being victimized, they were sitting there sneering, smirking, half smiles on their face the entire time. I mean, they enjoyed the abuse of Justice Kavanaugh, or then Judge Kavanaugh. Now, Judicial Watch has Freedom of Information Act requests about Kamala Harris's activities while she was in California. So if anything interesting comes from that, I'll let you know. But I thought what was really interesting is that John Eastman, who's a great constitutional law expert, great professor, had a piece in Newsweek, of all places. Newsweek, no friends of conservatives there. It was an op-ed. And the title of the op-ed is Some Questions for Kamala Harris about eligibility. And it was an opinion piece. And it raised the question about whether Harris is eligible to be vice president under the citizenship clause of the Constitution. Essentially, you can't run for vice president unless you're eligible to be president. And in order to be president, you have to be a natural born citizen. And the 14th Amendment defines natural born citizen as someone who is not only born here in the territory of the United States, but also subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So there was a Supreme Court decision last century or so that suggested that permanent resident aliens, children of permanent resident aliens, are citizens automatically by virtue of being born here. John Eastman looked at the law, looked at the history of how that law has been interpreted, how the Constitution has been interpreted, and he suggested that because Harris's parents were here perhaps temporarily on student visas, they weren't subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, and therefore Harris is not eligible to be president, and therefore can't be vice president. Now, I don't know if he's correct on that. I think it's a more substantial issue than the left would have you believe. So I tweeted out a question with a link to the article saying, is she eligible under the citizenship clause to be vice president? And a lawyer close to President Trump, Jenna Ellis, retweeted it, and the president was asked about it. So now the left has gone crazy saying it's false and you can't even ask the question. You're a racist, which is absurd because similar questions were asked about John McCain and Ted Cruz. I mean, I remember talking to reporters back in the day when this Obama birth certificate issue was floating around. And I thought there were more substantial questions about McCain's eligibility than Barack Obama's. So this has nothing to do with race. It just has something to do with the Constitution. And the left hates the idea that there be any difference between citizens and non-citizens. So any constitutional questions around this, they go crazy about. So I don't know what the answer is. And, it could be argued, for instance, that being lawfully here is enough to subject you to the jurisdiction of the United States under the law. I mean, for instance, the typical argument in this famous Supreme Court decision is that it highlights that diplomats, their children born here, aren't citizens. So the question arises, is someone here illegally? Are their children born here? Are they citizens? Would an invading army that was sired children, would their children be citizens if the mother and father were part of the invasion? Or, as John Eastman suggests, would students here temporarily, not permanent residents at the time, are they subject to the jurisdiction of the United States? What does that phrase mean? Why is it there? Is it just meaningless? Obviously, it's not meaningless. And so the debate about that, I guess, is not something we're allowed to have. Now, I don't know if anyone would have standing to, I haven't thought about it like this yet, challenge her eligibility. Although I suppose the Senate or Congress could ultimately decide on her eligibility if when the election moves there through the Electoral College and the certification of votes for her as vice president, if Biden and Kamala Harris were to win. So I encourage you to look at the Eastman piece. I don't know, what do you think? Maybe he's all wet. I know I'm friendly with him. I think he's a great guy, smart lawyer. He's an expert. So whenever you hear the media say the experts say it's wrong, that's not true. I'm an expert. They hate to admit it, but I'm an expert. Judicial Watch is an expert. John Eastman's an expert. So you can be sure there are experts who are raising questions about her eligibility. I don't know. I think she might be eligible. I think it's a close call. I don't know if it can be adjudicated, but it's a close call. And so when you hear reporters say that it's a, quote, false and racist, that's just politics. That's just silliness. It's absurd. It's a dispute. Now, the left is right in that if the law generally is allowed anyone born here to be termed a citizen. The question Eastman says is, practically speaking, that may have been the case, but is that what the law and the Constitution requires? And he's suggesting no. He's suggesting no. So it's a piece well worth reviewing.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.